Welcome. Once in a while, we listen to a talk and we know we have experienced something special. We know we have experienced something memorable. And we know that this talk will stay with us for a long time. For many of us in the objectivist community, such a talk was one that my colleague, Dr. Onkar Ghate, gave back in 2007. It was a talk with the memorable title Atlas Shrugged, America's Second Declaration of Independence. And today, we'll get the chance to watch this memorable talk again, and we'll have the chance to watch it together. Because America's Independence Day is approaching, and we thought this is a very fitting opportunity to link a unique novel, the ideas of and the values of a unique novel, with the ideas and the values of a unique country. We also want you to support us in our efforts to share this revolutionary message of Atlas Shrugged, to help more people come across the moral revolution of Ayn Rand, a revolution that she saw as the continuation of the political revolution and of the spirit of the 4th of July. And before we re-watch the talk, actually there will be a broadcast. We will watch only the main part of the talk, not the introduction, not the Q&A. We'll just watch Onkar's lecture. But before we broadcast the talk, I have with me today Onkar himself for a short introduction before the broadcast. So Onkar, I watched this talk some years ago, and the time I was watching it, I thought, okay, this is a love letter to the country. This is a love letter to the ideas that made America special and the people that made this country possible. But my first question to you has to do with the title itself, because this is the first thing that stuck out for me. America's Second Declaration of Independence. And this Second Declaration of Independence is a novel. How did you come up with this concept?
It's really what the story of Atlas Shrugged is about. So if you think of the parallel between the founding of America and what Atlas Shrugged is about, start with the founding of America. It's in the run-up to the Declaration of Independence, what we would now call the Americans, are trying to find common ground, trying to appease, make terms with, compromise with Britain. And they find over like a period of decades that they're just unable to do it. And the last straw is we need to declare our own independence. And thinking of some of the wording of the Declaration, assume our status as equals. So now they're declaring we're going to be a new nation. We're the equal of Britain or of France. So they're assuming their own place as, you can think of it like a full individual or a full adult in the world. And what Atlas Shrugged is about that same pattern of, it's about the men who are enormously productive, have a great ability, intelligence, the kind of people who built America. And they've been, over a period of a long time, been trying to find some kind of common ground, make terms, compromise with their actual opponents and enemies. And what the story is about is that them learning that's what we've been doing, and we've got to stop doing that. And so the way that I put it is that you're declaring your moral independence. We're assuming our place as individuals in the world and in our society, and we're not going to be treated like second-class citizens there to be exploited. That's what the novel's about. And in that sense, it is parallel to the story of the creation of America itself.
Right. So the two protagonists here is, on the one hand, the protagonist of July 4th, the founding fathers, and when it comes to Atlas Shrugged, it's Ayn Rand. So listening to your talk, one gets the idea that Ayn Rand feels this spiritual bond towards the founding fathers. So how does her ideas relate to the ideas of the founding fathers?
Yes, she had profound admiration for the founding fathers, for the creation of America, and particularly for the Declaration of Independence. And that's another link of why I titled it like this. She called the Declaration of Independence the greatest political document in human history. And she meant it. Like, what, that was not hyperbole. She meant that. So she thinks of herself as championing and defending America. And one way you can look at it to make it, to focus it, in the Declaration, probably the most radically new idea, and there's a lot of radical new ideas in the Declaration, is that an individual should pursue his own happiness. He has the right to do that. That right should be protected. Governments are instituted to protect his rights, and the end of what he's after is to achieve his own happiness. That's at a political level. If you ask at a moral level, does anybody champion and defend the pursuit of happiness when we mean it as each individual pursuing their own individual happiness? The answer is no, no one does, until Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged. And so to think of it like, what is it that she is celebrating and then giving a much deeper explanation and defense for? It's the idea that morally you should, it's right, morally right, to pursue your own happiness. And that's what the Atlas Shrugged is about, and about the heroes of the story learning to do that, and learning to do that fully. And it's, again, it's a deep and profound tie to what the Declaration of Independence and the American Revolution is about, if you understand it at a deep philosophical level.
Right. One last question, because I know everyone in our audience is looking forward to the broadcast, is looking forward to the lecture itself. But I have to ask you, you gave this lecture in 2007. We are at 2024. Looking back and comparing 2007 to today, are you more optimistic about where the country is going? Are you more optimistic that this moral revolution that Ayn Rand envisioned can actually take place?
I'm more optimistic in this sense. It's our mission at the Institute, at where you work, where I work, the Ayn Rand Institute, is to get Ayn Rand's new ideas, and especially her new moral ideas, the moral revolution that she's launching in Atlas Shrugged, to get that into more people's minds. And one of the ways to do that is to get Atlas Shrugged into more people's hands, into readers who are going to consume the book and the story. And it, as you know, it's a mystery story. It's an exciting story. So it ignites a lot of young people. We're growing. I mean, ARI, we're trying to get bigger and bigger, but I've been here 20 plus years, and we've doubled or tripled in size since I've been here. So we're getting more effective at getting our message out. But we know it's a long-term struggle. Our mission is long-term. It's not like we're going to convince people in 5 years or 10 years. We're going to convince more people 5 years from now than now. And again, more people 10 years from now than 5. But this is a mission that's going to take time. It's part of why we need support, because it's a long-range project. And I don't think there's anything more difficult than changing people's moral ideas. So to get to people to understand this enlightenment idea that the pursuit of happiness is what your life should be about, and again, the should means morally should, they're being taught from all kinds of directions and avenues, the opposite of that. So for this idea to really take hold, it's going to be long-term. It's a long-term prospects, but the idea is right. And the proof of this, and this is, Ayn Rand often said this, the proof that the idea is right is the success of America, and particularly its success insofar as it lived up to the promise of the Declaration of Independence. And so what we should be seeing is success building upon success. And as people get more interested in Ayn Rand and her ideas, they achieve success in their own lives, and they dedicate their own lives to the pursuit of their own happiness. And when people see that, they in effect want in, like, I want some of that. And that's how the ideas and the philosophy will grow. And I'm certainly optimistic long-term that this will succeed.
One last thing before we travel back in time to 2007 and we find ourselves in that beautiful hotel where the talk was given. I have a request for our viewers. Help us get this book in the hands of more people. Picture this. Picture an idealistic young person which is already burning with the fire of wanting to do something with their life, of wanting to change the world, of wanting to be something bigger than what they are at the moment. And imagine that young idealistic person coming into contact with Atlas Shrugged. This is what we are trying to do, but we need your help. So you have the chance right now to help us by going to aynrand.org/donate, aynrand.org/donate, and whatever you think is whatever you can give to help us again pass the baton of this moral revolution to more and more young people. So now we are going to proceed to the actual broadcast. It will be in the same stream. I will be in the comments, and we're all to watch together this talk by Onkar, back from 2007, Atlas Shrugged, American Second Declaration of Independence. Onkar, thank you very much, and I'll see the 2007 Onkar in a few seconds in the screen.
Great, thanks, Steve.
So let's begin. The Ayn Rand Institute's mission is no doubt an ambitious one. We're trying to help bring about an intellectual change in the culture that will restore and revitalize America's foundation. And perhaps our most important activity in this regard is to get Ayn Rand's novels into the hands of Americans. And the most vital of her novels to get into their hands is Atlas Shrugged. Now, why? Why do we believe that the foundation of America needs restoring? And what does a novel, a work of fiction, have to do with anything, much less with the course of a culture and the fate of a nation? Now, these are the questions I'm going to try to answer tonight. My focus is not going to be on the novels, on the details of the novel's story. And I'm going to try to avoid as many plot spoilers as I can for those who have not yet read the novel. My focus is going to be on Atlas Shrugged's cultural importance. Now, to understand that cultural importance, we must first rewind about 230 years to the birth of the nation and see what the American Revolution both accomplished and failed to accomplish. It's easy to forget how radically new an idea America is. The Founding Fathers invented a new form of government. All previous forms of government had concentrated power into the hands of the state at the expense of the individual. Theocracy placed power into the hands of priests and popes, who, as spokesmen for the supernatural, were to be obeyed without question. Monarchy placed power into the hands of a king or a queen, whose subjects lived and died by the ruler's edicts. Aristocracy placed power into the hands of a hereditary elite, who trampled on members of the lower classes. Democracy placed power into the hands of the majority, who could do whatever they wished to the minority. In all these systems, recalcitrant individuals were dealt with in the same way. They were greeted with the instruments of physical compulsion, with imprisonment, torture, death. The priests placed Galileo under house arrest and burned Bruno at the stake. The king beheaded Thomas More. The aristocrats trampled upon the individual peasants en masse, sometimes so that literally they could bathe in the peasants' blood. The Athenian democracy ordered Socrates to drink hemlock. To all such outrages, the Founding Fathers said, no more. They devised a political system that placed power into the hands of the individual at the expense of the state. The individual, they declared, possesses the inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The government does not stand above the individual as his master. The government stands below the individual as its servant. To secure these rights, Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And if a government trespasses on the rights of the individual, quote, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, close quote. Now in the Declaration, the Founding Fathers were of course declaring independence from Great Britain. But more deeply, they were declaring independence from priests and from kings, from aristocrats and from the will of the majority. They were creating a sanctuary for individuals with unbowed minds, for the Galileos and the Socrates of the world, who were now to meet with a different fate. Now, what motivated the Founding Fathers to take the incredibly dangerous action of creating a new country? Why did they risk their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor? The key to understanding the Founding Fathers' motivation is that they were this worldly, fact-based idealists. As students of the Enlightenment, of Europe's Age of Reason, the Founding Fathers believed in the perfectibility of man. If man unfailingly uses his rational mind, and if he carefully studies and formulates the methods by which, in fact, human values and prosperity are achieved, then perfection, they held, here on earth was possible to man. This is precisely what the Founding Fathers did with respect to the subject of government. They painstakingly studied the forms and the history of governments in order to define a perfect method of governance. The result was the Constitution of the United States, along with its system of checks and balances, which were designed to prevent the emergence of any absolute power. Now, to most British subjects, British rule was good, which comparatively speaking to the rest of the world, it was. And it was good enough. But to the Founding Fathers, good was not good enough. As idealists, they sought perfection. And when they saw the possibility for action, therefore they rebelled, when few other men would have done so. Now, to burn with this type of idealism requires a profound self-esteem. It requires a spirit that wants to see perfection made real for itself and in its own life. Genuine self-esteem, not the we're all okay variety, is an earned esteem of one's own soul. It is the conviction that you are deserving of success and happiness because you are continually working to achieve these. If you wonder about the imposing stature of the Founding Fathers, of men like Washington and Jefferson, this is the key. They were men of genuine self-esteem, men who took the perfection of their own lives, mind, character, and happiness with the utmost seriousness. They were abstract thinkers and doers, men of wide and constantly expanding erudition, who were also lawyers, farmers, printers, business owners, architects, and inventors. Now, this kind of individual will jealously guard his freedom to follow his own judgment, to make his own choices, and to enjoy the values and wealth he creates. To such an individual, the issue of his own perfectibility is a daily reality, which he will allow no one to usurp. To such an individual, the idea that he is sinful, or irrational, or a miserable creature, desperately in need of a superior to tell him what to do, has no reality. This kind of individual will allow no king or government to dictate his convictions or dispose of his fortune and life, not for any reason or to any degree. For the Founding Fathers, the motto, live free or die, had real meaning. Without freedom, they would be dead. Their mode of existence would be dead. Their unrelenting, unbowed pursuit of their own perfection would be dead. And so they fought. The Declaration of Independence was a declaration of self-esteem. It was a declaration of self-esteem. But the Founding Fathers' achievement is eroding. They would be shocked by the power that is now concentrated in the hands of the American government at the expense of the individual. Can you imagine Jefferson submitting to building inspectors who would decide if Monticello is up to code? Or pleading with FDA officials to take an experimental drug that, according to his scientific judgment, is beneficial? Or allowing Social Security administrators to dictate how much he has to save for his retirement and where he has to invest it? Or patiently watching the tax collector as he takes his money away and pours it down the aid drains of Africa? Can you imagine him prostrating himself before the FCC, who would determine if its broadcast content is obscene? Can you imagine Thomas Jefferson seeking the government's permission to smoke a cigarette in a restaurant, eat irradiated spinach, screw in an incandescent light bulb, or buy a trans fatty French fry? And yet today, Americans do not have the self-esteem to protest these usurpations of their judgment, their choice, their freedom. America's declaration of self-esteem has not taken full root. Why not? Now, although the core of self-esteem is an earned confidence in one's power to think and to produce, which Americans have earned in abundance, full self-esteem requires that one self-consciously value oneself. Full self-esteem requires that one know in explicit moral terms that one is good and why. This positive moral evaluation and self-evaluation, the Declaration of Independence does not fully provide, and the Founding Fathers could not provide. The European Enlightenment had promised to put morality on a rational, scientifically and mathematically precise foundation, but it could never deliver on its promise. And far too many of its intellectual leaders assumed that the content of morality would be essentially Christian morality, stripped of its mystical trappings and somehow defended by rational argument. The Founding Fathers agreed with the European intellectuals. Jefferson, for instance, made his own compilation of Jesus' teachings. Jefferson's compilation, which omits the miraculous from the New Testament, includes the Sermon on the Mount. Indeed, Jefferson in a letter refers to Jesus as, quote, the sublime preacher of the Sermon on the Mount, close quote. Now ask yourself this: does the Sermon on the Mount not indict Jefferson and the other Founding Fathers as evil? When the British struck America's right cheek, did Jefferson in the Declaration tell America to turn to offer them the left? Did Jefferson love his enemies, or did he go to war with them? Did Jefferson, who had a gallery of worthies in his home, portraits of men like Isaac Newton and John Locke, think that the blessed are the poor in spirit, or that the only people worthy of admiration are those who choose to make something of their spirit? Did Jefferson and the other Founding Fathers think that the meek shall inherit the earth, or that the rational and the industrious shall? Did Jefferson give up riches, or did he seek them? On every essential, the Founding Fathers did the opposite of what the sermon commands. And that's because the Sermon on the Mount is a declaration of war on self-esteem. It is a declaration of war on self-esteem. Anyone who has achieved anything and taken pride and joy in his accomplishments is condemned by Jesus. Woe unto you that are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe unto you that are full, for ye shall hunger. Woe unto you that laugh now, for ye shall mourn and weep. Well, who then has a right to feel good about themselves, according to the sermon? The meek and the poor in spirit, which means those who have little cause to esteem themselves. So you can look at America's history this way. The Founding Fathers created a new form of government and thereby opened up a continent to their kind of men, men of self-esteem, individuals who were ready to drop their backward cultures and work for a better future, individuals who valued themselves so highly that they sought the best for themselves and in themselves by coming to America. But the Founding Fathers left these people unable fully to understand or appreciate their own greatness, open to every form of abuse, and vulnerable to every sort of moral denunciation. And the denunciation soon came. The new country had exploded into an orgy of productiveness. Most responsible for this prosperity were men who had never had a chance to exist before, capitalists and industrialists. Oil, steel, new financial instruments, railroads, these and other innovations, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the J.P. Morgans, and the Vanderbilts brought into the New World and taught men how to value. For this, they were denounced as robber barons. In essence, it was Jesus' voice rising against them. Woe unto you that are rich, for ye shall suffer. Woe unto you that build railroads and oil derricks, for ye shall mourn and weep. And more than just moral denunciations came. If America was to be the land of the ideal, as the Founding Fathers had promised, and if the ideal is in fact that the meek and the poor in spirit shall inherit the earth, then America's government needed drastic overhaul. All the new government powers, the alphabet soup of regulatory agencies that Jefferson would have rebelled against, were justified by attacking the men of self-esteem in the name of the meek and the wretched. For instance, what is the moral justification for the FDA's existence? Rich, greedy drug companies, i.e., those who discover and manufacture life-saving compounds, will exploit and experiment on hapless patients, so the government must oversee the company's every move. Besides, how can the meek be served unless the government, through its process of approvals and rejections, favors the kind of drugs the meek need? And how can the poor in spirit achieve blessedness if in their mindlessness they pop some pill that they should have known might kill them? So to protect the blessed from their own irrationality, we need wise government officials to tell everyone what pills they may and may not swallow. Or what is the moral justification for the creation of Social Security? To quote from the administration's website in an article about the history of Social Security, it is, quote, the government's duty to provide for the welfare of the poor, close quote. If a person is too meek to provide for his old age, then those who are richer should be forced to provide for his retirement. If a person is too ignorant or irresponsible to save for his own retirement, if he is that poor in spirit, then the government must step in and, in his name, strip everyone of control over their retirement plans. Or what was the moral justification for the income tax ratified in 1913? Soak the rich. Now, to all of this, to whatever form the sacrifice of men of self-esteem to men without self-esteem takes, Ayn Rand in Atlas Shrugged says, no more. In one of the world's great acts of independence, Ayn Rand declares, in effect, that the essence of the Sermon on the Mount, along with everything it presupposes and everything it implies, is evil. The idea that the good consists in achieving the good of others, of your neighbors, of your country, even of your enemies, of anyone or anything, real or imagined, that is not you. The idea that you must sacrifice your personal values without even the expectation of return. The idea that nobility means being selfless and wickedness means being concerned with self. The idea that morality is synonymous with altruism and immorality synonymous with egoism. All of this is challenged in Atlas Shrugged. Of this whole approach to good and evil, Ayn Rand asked questions no one dared to ask. What, she asked, is the good according to this morality? Now, supposedly, it's that you achieve the good of others. But what then is their good? Well, presumably that they achieve the good of still other people. But then we're again faced with the same unanswered question. What is the good of these other people? To the question, what is the good, this approach to morality actually offers no answer. It gives you only a chain of arrows leading to nowhere, a string of zeros adding up to nothing. The code upholds no ultimate value, no positive ideal. It is unconcerned with the main task of ethics, namely of defining the good that men must live up to. Now, what does this do to men in actual practice? It means that it's impossible to know whether one has ever achieved the good or failed in the attempt. Now, what does this do to a man of self-esteem? To anyone striving to be good, this code declares that you have never done enough. No matter how much you've sacrificed, you can never achieve your own moral perfection. You can never reach the good. Have you ever wondered why the demands for sacrifice can continue to grow and grow? The income tax, for instance, started off as something that would only, of course, apply to the very rich, and which, of course, would be capped at 7% of income. But then it grew to 15%, 20%, 25% of all income, and including in its clutches more and more productive citizens. Now, can we at any stage protest that we've sacrificed enough, that we've already achieved the good of others? Don't be so naive. Who said the good is achievable? Or why is it, decade after decade, as the US pours money into Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, still more handouts are demanded from us? Can we ever protest that we've sacrificed enough, that we've achieved the good of others? Don't be so naive. Why do you think the good is achievable? Therefore, the result to any rational person striving to be good is a state of moral anxiety, self-doubt, and guilt. No matter how much he has sacrificed, the thought haunts him that he could have sacrificed still more. Most good people, therefore, stop trying to be 100% moral, and they thereby abandon the quest for self-esteem. Now, what of the scoundrels who are actually unconcerned with being moral? No matter the nature of their concrete actions or how dreadful the outcome so far, so long as their motive is not self-interest, anything is permitted to them. Whatever they do, they retain the halo of morality. Have you ever wondered why, when the so-called humanitarians at the UN produce debacle after debacle and corruption after corruption, their power and prestige only increase? Have you ever wondered why, when government program after government program leads to disaster, when Social Security undermines a person's retirement and public education undermines a child's mind, the power of these programs only increases? Have you ever wondered why, as individuals were murdered in the thousands and tens of thousands in communist Russia and China, onlookers in the East and West alike said, "Give them more time. They may eventually achieve the good of others"? Atlas Shrugged gives us the answer. Nothing can count as failure to achieve the good of others, because nothing counts as success. to quote from Atlas, quote, "The good of others is a magic formula that transforms anything into gold, a formula to be recited as a guarantee of moral glory and as a fumigator for any action, even the slaughter of a continent. You need no proof, no reasons, no success. All you need to know is that your motive was the good of others, not your own. Your only definition of the good is a negation. The good is the non-good for me." Close quote. So what we have here is a negative morality. This code is unable to specify the nature of the good, but it does define in precise detail the nature of evil. To be concerned with advancing your own interests is evil. To escape evil, therefore, you must sacrifice your values. The concrete advice the code offers is sacrifice, sacrifice, and then sacrifice some more. This is the real focus of the code and why Ayn Rand names it the morality of sacrifice. Sacrifice your money to strangers who have not earned it, proclaims the Sermon on the Mount, and sacrifice your love to enemies you hate. Sacrifice the values of both matter and spirit. Sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. But does the morality of sacrifice not contain some enormous hidden double standard? As Ayn Rand asks in Atlas Shrugged, and all further quotes will be from the novel unless I indicate otherwise. Quote, "Why is it moral to serve the happiness of others, but not your own? Why is it immoral to produce a value and keep it, but moral to give it away? And if it is not moral for you to keep a value, why is it moral for others to accept it? If you are selfless and virtuous when you give it, are they not selfish and vicious when they take it? Does virtue consist of serving vice? Is the purpose of those who are good self-immolation for the sake of those who are evil?" Close quote. Now, what is the Sermon on the Mount's answer to these questions? Well, to quote again from Atlas, "The monstrance answer is no, the takers are not evil, provided they did not earn the value you gave them. It is not immoral for them to accept it, provided they are unable to produce it, unable to deserve it, unable to give you any value in return." Close quote. Why, for instance, do drug companies not have the right to sell their inventions to anyone eager to buy them? Because the companies invented them. Now, why do we, the public, through the FDA, have the right to dictate what drugs these companies can and cannot sell, how they have to research, test, manufacture, and label the drugs, what uses the drugs can be prescribed for, and who can purchase them? What gives us this incredible power? The fact that we didn't invent the drugs. Or why does an employee not have the right to invest all his income as he judges best for his old age? Because he earned the money. Why do we, the public, have the right to take part of his income, pool it into a so-called insurance scheme, and dole it out to whoever supposedly needs it? Because we didn't earn the money. Quote, "Such is the secret core of your creed, the other half of your double standard. It is immoral to live by your own effort, but moral to live by the effort of others. It is immoral to consume your own product, but moral to consume the product of others. It is the parasites who are the moral justification for the existence of the producers, but the existence of the producers is an end in itself." Close quote. Now, if you want just one contemporary example to fix in your mind the gruesome essence of the morality of sacrifice and what it does to self-esteem, consider America's response to 9/11. When the Twin Towers collapsed, many people in the Middle East danced in the streets. But others there, although sympathetic to the revelers, sought to hide the revelry from view. They worried that the attacks had gone too far this time, and that America would refuse to suffer such an outrage. They worried that our self-esteem was not completely strangled, and that their gloating would revive it. They worried about our indignation and our wrath. And there were some signs of this on the part of the American people. There was some anger and some desire for revenge. People wanted Bush to do something. Responding to the country's mood, the administration promised a campaign of shock and awe and the extraction of infinite justice. But then, there is no doubt, Bush asked himself, what would Jesus do? Tragically, it was one of the few questions to which Bush knows the answer. Operation Infinite Justice was renamed. Gone was the extraction of justice, replaced by the goal of bringing democracy to the Middle East, so that its inhabitants could elect whomever they wish, killers emphatically not excluded. A campaign of shock and awe did still materialize, but not in the way originally meant. Imagine the utter shock of the Islamic warriors and their numerous supporters when they realized that it was not US bombs dropping on their heads, but packets of lentils, barley stew, biscuits, peanut butter, and strawberry jam, along with the message, "This is a food gift from the people of the United States of America." Imagine the awe they must have felt at their own power. They had attacked the Pentagon and toppled the Twin Towers, and this had brought them not US soldiers bent on their complete destruction, but US soldiers bent on rebuilding their hospitals and mosques and bringing them the vote, the young soldiers all the while dying in the process. We are proving to these people that the meek shall inherit the earth, and that blessed indeed are the poor in spirit. The power these killers feel is real. It is granted to them by the morality of sacrifice. Now, the Sermon on the Mount and all its variations through the centuries, Atlas Shrugged reveals, is a morality of evil and for evil. But it has a fatal flaw. It requires that its victims accept it. Quote, "I saw that the enemy was an inverted morality, and that my sanction was its only power. I saw that there comes a point in the defeat of any man of virtue when his own consent is needed for evil to win. I saw that I could put an end to your outrages by pronouncing a single word in my mind. I pronounced it. That word was no." This is the beginning of Ayn Rand's declaration of moral independence. To win one's moral independence, one must first say no to the corrupt ideal of sacrifice. One must reject as unspeakably evil any morality that demands sacrifices, whether the sacrifice of your values to the misfortune or irrationality of others, or the sacrifice of their values to your misfortune or irrationality. Whether it be a relative demanding an attention he has not earned, or the latest healthcare scheme from Washington, promising to give us something for nothing by soaking the rich, one must say no. The moment the good requires victims, it ceases to be good. To win one's moral independence, one must uphold the individual's moral right to exist, beginning with one's own. You have the right to exist, a moral right to your own life and to trying to achieve happiness within its days and years. No one has a moral right to demand that you gain his permission to exist by slavishly ministering to his needs and protecting him from his own shortcomings. No one has a claim on your life. The moment someone waves his pain or need or failures around, proclaiming that it is these that entitle him to your values, he removes himself from any moral consideration. The Founding Fathers grasped politically that no one gains a right to your life by virtue of his real or alleged superiority. Neither priest, nor king, nor aristocrat, nor the majority gains a right to your life by virtue of superior social position, mystic visions, ancestors, wealth, or numbers. What must now be grasped morally is that no one gains a claim to your life by virtue of his real or alleged inferiority. No one gains a moral claim to your life by virtue of his inferior wealth, power, happiness, intelligence, ability, knowledge, or judgment. What this means is that your moral stature is not at the mercy of someone who has failed or perhaps could not even be bothered to provide for his own health care or retirement. So politically, the Declaration of Independence taught us to reject the notion of undeserved serfdom. Morally, Atlas Shrugged teaches us to reject the notion of unearned guilt. Now, in place of unearned guilt, one should embrace the nature of one's existence as an individual human being, a being that must seek and create values in order to remain vibrantly alive. This is the precondition of self-esteem, to seek in all things the best for oneself. To embrace life is to recognize that the whole act of valuing arises in the context of one's own life and the need to make it go well. From a child choosing a toy, to a teenager choosing a friend, to an adult choosing a career or a lover or a form of government, the need to do so arises from the same question: what will advance my life? The precondition of self-esteem is to refuse, as the founding fathers refused, to settle for anything less than the ideal in one's life. And to this quest for the ideal, morality, properly conceived, is an indispensable aid. Its task is to teach you fully what to value and how to value. Its task is to teach you how to achieve life and happiness. Atlas Shrugged accordingly offers a new conception of the moral ideal, a new conception of the sacred and the exalted, far different from that of the Sermon on the Mount. Fundamental to Atlas's new moral code are the actual requirements of life and happiness. Central to its new ideal, therefore, are the virtues of thought, production, and trade. Thought, production, and trade. Atlas Shrugged is a hymn to man's mind. Every value that man has achieved had to first be discovered by some individual mind. From picking fruits, to hunting with spears, to planting crops in order to harvest them only months later. From the invention of theater as a source of enjoyment and emotional fuel, to the discovery of perspective in painting, to the creation of music, and then of more and more complex harmonies and forms of composition. From the identification of the laws of motion to the formulation of the laws of logic. From the discovery of germs and antibiotics to the invention of the transistor and the computer. For each of these steps, some mind had to figure it out. This is the source of human life and happiness. To worship life, therefore, means to worship man's intelligence. And if it is one's own life that one seeks, then the development of one's intelligence becomes the most fundamental of goals. To learn to think, to make connections, and to see farther than one has so far seen. To learn to think carefully, systematically, logically, objectively. To learn to see the full implications of one's ideas. All this becomes the most important of tasks. The scope of one's knowledge and the power of one's thinking will dictate the success or failure of all one's value pursuits, from earning a university degree to succeeding as a doctor or computer programmer or CEO, to raising kids who are competent, well-behaved, and independent. For Ayn Rand, as for the Founding Fathers, abstract thought is not a game in which one cynically marvels at the alleged paradoxes of the universe. Thought, abstract thought, is purposeful. It demands a serious dedication to one's life. It demands the honesty of a mind seeking all the facts, because these and only these will dictate its conclusions about how to act. It demands the independence of a mind reaching its own verdict, no matter how many people say otherwise. It demands the integrity of a mind committed to acting on its own considered judgments. Thought is purposeful. Thought is selfish. Thought is for the sake of production. Which brings us to the second, production. The virtue of production, Atlas Shrugged shows, means a dedication to making the ideal real. It means far more than holding a job. It is a dedication to the work of, quote, remaking the earth in the image of one's values. It represents the proper union of the spiritual and material. What Atlas Shrugged shows is that the souls of an artist and of an industrialist are one and the same. The artist has a new vision of beauty, of what could be, and he strives to give it material form, to erect a sculpture of a woman, to paint a beautiful landscape, or to write Cyrano de Bergerac. The industrialist has a new vision of prosperity, of what could be, whether it be railroads crisscrossing the continent, a metal superior to steel, or a computer on every desk. And he works endlessly to bring his vision into existence. All production is born of a dedication to one's life in reality. It is the earthly form of idealism, and without it, there is no self-esteem. Now, the producer, in his dealings with other men, demands a non-sacrificial mode of existence. In issues of both matter and spirit, in money and in love, he is a trader. Quote, a trader does not ask to be paid for his failures, nor does he ask to be loved for his flaws. Just as he does not give his work except in trade for material values, so he does not give the values of his spirit, his love, his friendship, his esteem, except in payment and in trade for human virtues, in payment for his own selfish pleasure, which he receives from men he can respect. Close quote. Trade is moral, not because it achieves the welfare of the meek or the wealth of the nation. Trade's justification is not that it somehow commutes selfishness into self-sacrifice. Adam Smith's invisible hand, taken as a justification, is corrupt. Trade needs no outside justification. The justification of trade is precisely that it's trade. It's an interaction in which each person is able to pursue his self-interest. It is the only form of interaction in which men meet one another as equals, not as exploiter and exploited. What is the result? What happens when, say, you trade your paycheck for a new computer? Both parties achieve their self-interest. You both obtain something more valuable to you than that which you give up. Trade is the only form of human interaction that at once demands self-esteem. It demands that each trader be seeking the best for his own life, and in turn allows each person to preserve his self-esteem, because he has neither sacrificed his self to others, nor tried to cheat reality through the double standard of demanding sacrifice of others to self. Trade, production, and thought. These form the core of Atlas Shrugged's new life-based morality. Now notice how starkly this ideal contrasts to the Sermon on the Mount's religious conception of morality. Faith, hope, and charity are its virtues. Faith means belief in the absence of logic. It is the opposite of thought. Hope means that you are unable to reach the ideal, that perfection is beyond your reach, but that by God's grace you might obtain it in some alleged afterlife. It is the opposite of working to achieve the ideal in this life. It is the opposite of production. Charity means giving yourself over body and soul to your neighbor and even your enemy, with the expectation of no return. It is the opposite of trade. Jesus on the cross exhibited these virtues. He had the faith that there was an otherworldly Father. He had the hope that he would gain the grace of this otherworldly being. He had the charity to sacrifice his own soul for those of sinners. The result was his death. For a morality of life, this cannot be the image of the moral ideal. What then is? The great thinkers and producers, the men of the mind, the heroes of Atlas Shrugged, the scientists, philosophers, artists, inventors, and industrialists who make a human mode of existence possible. Individuals like Aristotle, Newton, Edison, and Rockefeller. Remember Jefferson's gallery of worthies. Who were some of the individuals included in it other than himself? Philosophers like Francis Bacon and John Locke, scientists like Isaac Newton and Benjamin Franklin, political thinkers and men of action like Voltaire, Turgot, and Thomas Paine. In Ayn Rand's terms, men of the mind. And this, in a nutshell, is the greatness of the American Revolution. It was the possibility of such ideal men that served as its motive power. And the tragedy of the Revolution is that Jefferson and the other founding fathers still thought of Jesus as the sublime preacher of the Sermon on the Mount. What Atlas Shrugged shows is that the choice is either or. And more, it shows us that Jefferson's gallery of worthies are worthy of that which they had never been granted before: moral respect, moral admiration, and moral esteem. In Atlas Shrugged, the character of Hank Rearden is the representative of the man of self-esteem, of the true American. Rearden is a man of tremendous intellect, drive, and productivity, who is denounced for his ability. And although he possesses the core of self-esteem, he's hobbled by the thought that morally he's unworthy. Atlas Shrugged is a story of his liberation. To all such men of real self-esteem, Atlas Shrugged throws a lifeline from the morality of sacrifice. Quote, "They had known that theirs was the power. I taught them that theirs was the glory." Close quote. Now, why did Ayn Rand do all of this in the form of a novel? Well, precisely because her concern was the moral ideal. She wanted to give material expression to her new vision of the ideal. The form in which one does this is art. "The goal of my writing," she said after Atlas Shrugged's publication, "is the projection of an ideal man." Art allows one to experience the ideal made real. It allows one to inhabit that world for a time. As anyone who's read Atlas Shrugged knows, the contemplation of a great work of art is an unforgettable and indispensable experience. Now, Ayn Rand, of course, knew that one can learn a lot from Atlas Shrugged, but she regarded this as a secondary benefit. The book's primary, essential value is that within its pages, one experiences her new ideal made perceptible and real. Any great romantic work of art is, to quote from one of her later essays, quote, "an entity complete in itself, an achieved, realized, immovable fact of reality, like a beacon raised over the dark crossroads of the world, saying, 'This is possible.'" Close quote. And that's what Atlas Shrugged is. By presenting a new moral ideal of what is possible to man, Atlas Shrugged is America's second declaration of independence. Now, having said this, I bet some of you are still wondering, is the comparison of Atlas Shrugged to the Declaration of Independence really that exact? After all, the Declaration won the support of the American people, whereas Ayn Rand's new moral ideal has not yet. Now, this is true, but I think, it's true only up to a certain point. First off, the Declaration and the American Revolution hardly had unanimous support. This did not stop the Founding Fathers from changing the world. Much more importantly, however, although Americans have not yet rejected the morality of the Sermon on the Mount and embraced Ayn Rand's new morality of life, they have embraced Atlas Shrugged. Since its publication in 1957, Atlas Shrugged has been popular. Last year, it sold over 130,000 copies. To be sure, the book is still regularly ignored or lampooned by many of the culture's so-called intellectuals, but not so among the nation's citizens. Atlas Shrugged has already had a significant impact on America. And you can, I believe, see this impact in two broad areas. First, it has helped disarm evil. And second, it has helped inspire the good. Take the first issue. Now, today it's hard to imagine the 20th century's infatuation with socialism, despite a trickle and then a stream and then a torrent of data about the misery and death socialism was producing in the countries experimenting with it. Intellectuals clung to it as the coming of heaven on earth. In America, socialism was to come not by revolution, but piecemeal and by vote. Now, there were other insightful critics of socialism, especially some economists, but none was more penetrating than Ayn Rand. In Atlas Shrugged and her later writings, she stripped socialism of its cloak of rationality. She showed it to be neo-mysticism, a secularized version of religion, a secularized version of religion. The intellectuals ignored or ridiculed Atlas Shrugged in an attempt to evade its existence, but they knew the critique existed. Now, a major explanation of socialism's lost appeal is, of course, the devastation and death it produced in Britain, in Russia, in Germany, and in China. But my point is that that awareness of the devastation was not sufficient for socialism's demise. The socialists were always ready with an excuse. Socialism had not been fully implemented, or we didn't wait for the latest 5-year plan to bear fruit, or monstrous extremists like Stalin, Hitler, and Mao have hijacked a peaceful system. Socialism is noble in theory, they cried, but men aren't yet good enough to practice it. We must try again. Atlas Shrugged showed that socialism is anti-life in practice because it's irrational in theory. Intellectually, Atlas Shrugged made the choice confronting the socialists clear. Choose the men of the mind by embracing capitalism, or choose to remain anti-capitalist by renouncing the men of the mind. Most socialists chose to remain anti-capitalist. They were thus revealed for the snarling nihilists that they are, and Americans increasingly abandoned the left. But not only did Atlas Shrugged in this way help give Americans some breathing room, it also provided them with clean air to breathe in. When prominent individuals in the culture are asked to name the books that have had the most impact on them, they regularly name Atlas Shrugged. The number of times that Dr. Brooke, the Institute's executive director, in his travels meets successful businessmen enthusiastic about Atlas Shrugged and its formative influence on them has ceased to surprise us. Atlas Shrugged has given men of the mind a sense that it is good to produce. It has inspired businessmen and entrepreneurs by showing them that their work is noble. A significant aspect of the revival of the business in the 80s and of the technological and entrepreneurial revolution in the 90s in Silicon Valley and beyond is this: the participants implicitly think that what they are doing is good. This is a conviction that Atlas Shrugged has helped create. Now, at the intellectual level, Atlas Shrugged has accomplished at least the following. It has helped resurrect the idea of capitalism. Before Atlas Shrugged, capitalism was not just a dirty word, it was an unspeakable word. The book put it back on the intellectual map. And so although today the essence of capitalism is still far from understood, the possibility of it being understood now exists. And Atlas Shrugged has helped gain recognition for human intelligence and ability, for man's mind. Prior to Atlas Shrugged, intellectuals prattled on about human instincts, material resources, and manual labor as the sources of prosperity. Today, many more people understand that the value potential contained in material resources and human labor remains unrealized, absent the actual source of prosperity, human intelligence. Today, companies and nations alike talk about the importance of human capital. Now, these, I believe, are some of the first steps in the march towards independence for the men of self-esteem. In Atlas Shrugged, they have been inspired by a vision of what can and should be. However, it's true, they have not yet come close to fully understanding that vision and the conditions under which it can endure. While the thinkers and producers of when the thinkers and producers of today explicitly talk about morality, some version of the Sermon on the Mount usually still gushes forth. Moreover, culturally, the intellectuals have regrouped. Centuries ago, after the brutality of religious rule, the intellectuals in effect said, the supernatural version of the Sermon on the Mount has failed, so let's try the secular version. Today, what we are beginning to see is the intellectuals saying that the secular version of the Sermon on the Mount has failed, so let's retry the supernatural version. It's always a game in which tails you lose, heads they win. So what remains to be done to in fact make Atlas Shrugged America's second Declaration of Independence? First, we must recognize that the hardest thing in the world for someone to do is question his moral code and embrace a new one. It is not an accident that in some 2,000 years since the Sermon on the Mount, only one individual has challenged that abysmal sermon and proposed a radically new moral code. And this is why we must get Atlas Shrugged in as many hands as we can, especially among the young, who are more willing to question received wisdom. We must learn and then continuously argue for Ayn Rand's new morality of life and against the morality of sacrifice. And we must show the implications of each code for every important issue of the day. In short, we must do the kind of work that the Institute is doing on an ever-increasing scale. And we should do this work not because the world might go to hell in 30 or 40 years. Although it might, that's not the issue. The Founding Fathers did not create a new nation because the world was about to go to hell. They created a new nation because they wanted to achieve the ideal. They were not motivated by a negative, but by a positive. In the words of Atlas Shrugged, it was not death that they wished to avoid, but life that they wished to live. In the name of what is possible, and on this, Atlas Shrugged's 50th anniversary, let us be grateful for the idealism and self-esteem that Atlas Shrugged can bring to our own lives if we work at them. And let us take our turn now to pledge our honor to achieving the idealism and self-esteem which Atlas Shrugged alone can bring back to America. Thank you.